welcome to Sound Heal Podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Brown, and thank you so much for joining me as we continue to explore the fields of sound healing, sound therapy, and generally the use of sound for health and wellness. Today, our guest is Ben Carroll, who is a former full-time touring musician and universal recording artist with album sales reaching hundreds of thousands. He really has a unique background and has now turned his focus, his passion, his career to the effect of sound and vibration on the body and mind. So this transition from rock star to sound healer is part of our conversation, the intuitive use of sound, and how sound can really shift our awareness, strengthen our intuition, and really help us access higher dimensions of self. This podcast is sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa, located in Sarasota, Florida. The Om Shop really can help you up-level your sound healing practice. In their showroom, they have the country's largest showroom of vibrational tools, but they can also assist you. They have an online platform where you can see all their options, all the things that they have, and they can really help advise you if you're looking for something specific. So I thank the Om Shop and Spa for their support and sponsorship of this podcast. I also ask you, if you can, to please rate, review, subscribe to this podcast. I would love for there to be an increased awareness of the archives of really amazing perspectives and conversations that this podcast has had over the past few years. So thank you, listeners, for your support as well. Please enjoy this episode with Ben Carroll. All right. Thanks, Ben, so much for joining us for this podcast. And I want to go to your background, the things that kind of led you to perhaps your first career as a professional musician. How did you get into music? What was it like for you as a youngster getting into music?
Well, I don't think I was ever not into music. It was pretty much the only thing that called to me through, consistently through my whole life. I started as a kid playing, different instruments in grade school. And then, by the time I was 11 years old, I found the electric guitar and started really getting into that, practicing a lot. And that's a very long story, but long story short, the society we live in tells us you have to do something with your life to make money. You need a career. So I was like, all right, I'm going to be a musician. So I followed the path of, going to high school, and I went to Berklee College of Music. And then after that, started a band and was very lucky that I was fairly successful with that band. And yeah, things magically lined up.
Yeah. Did you find it initially exciting to be in a band that became really successful, and then when did the challenges appear? I know road life and touring is not easy, so maybe mention the rewards and the challenges of that part of your life.
Of course, it was extremely rewarding to be playing in a band that was successful, playing with all the bands that I grew up listening to, playing in front of thousands of people every night. It was exciting. But as the years go on, well, it was exciting, but at the same time, growing up, I was somewhat of an introvert. So I went from being alone 99% of the time to being surrounded by people 99% of the time, living on a tour bus, and all that's involved with that. So that was stressful in the beginning, but you get used to that, and you grow into personalities that are able to deal with that. And then, as time went on, years of touring, it wears on you. It certainly does. It's a difficult lifestyle. We weren't we weren't rolling around in private jets like you two. We were moderately successful, but not successful enough to live that lifestyle. And dealing with record labels trying to dictate what you do, and we were on Universal Records, and dealing with just the exhaustion of touring, it kind of, after a while, got a little bit disheartening. I kind of lost the sparkle that it once had. So the band that I was in, which was a band called Ra, like the Egyptian sun god, rock music, we we decided to go into hiatus because at that time, there was a lot of other things going on in the world. That was around 2008, 2009, when gas prices were really high, and we were spending all the money that we were generating on the road on the gas for the tour bus. So it just it stopped making sense all the way around at that point in time. So we kind of went into hiatus and didn't do anything else for a handful of years. We've released a couple albums since then, at least a couple.
So was the, we're mentioning kind of that musical side, but did you find that you were quite intuitive and just naturally spiritual when you were young? And perhaps did that kind of get buried a bit when you were so busy with music? Or, how did that side of you develop, and how early on do you remember that side of you?
I remember it very well, and it was very early on. And that is why I was attracted to music in the first place. The whole writing songs and getting into that is the societal structure of it. But the reason why I was attracted to music and what I was doing before I was trying to write songs was when I was a kid. I have a very specific memory of laying on a hammock in the sun and listening to the droning of a plane, an airplane. I grew up near Salisbury Beach in Massachusetts, and there were airplanes that used to fly over my house all the time, dragging the signs behind them like they used to do with advertisements. They used to go along the beach. But I remember one day, just laying in the sun on the hammock, listening to that droning sound. And I just went into a really, really deep space that was so relaxing and so comforting. And in retrospect, that was the first time I ever achieved an altered state of consciousness through music. And after that experience, it just became something that I was trying to replicate. I started sleeping with a fan on in my bedroom every night, and I would, kind of hum along. And I had always been musical. My first instrument was pots and pans, to my mom's dismay, and I kind of moved to bowls. So I guess I kind of went back to my roots. And it was always, first and foremost, it was the connection to the sound that brought me to that. But like I was saying, the structures of the society that we live in tell you that if you want to be a musician and be successful, you have to write songs, you have to get on the radio, and you have to do that. That is the way to success. So that by the time I was in high school and going into college, that had become part of my focus. But I was still, when I played for fun, when I was, a teenager and into my early 20s, I wasn't playing songs. I would be creating sounds and kind of traveling on those sounds, working with a lot of drones and just doing that because that's what I like to do. The songs were what I did to try and be successful.
Yeah, and you almost just kind of shifted the instruments that you drone with. Yeah. Well, maybe let's talk about maybe we'll come back to the drone, but let's talk about, I don't really want to call it a transition into sound healing, sound therapy, because it sounds like that's really always been part of your path, and it just shifted how you were using it. So after your band kind of took a hiatus, where did you find yourself in your life, and how did you lean more into kind of this transformative use of sound?
Yeah. So when the band went into hiatus, we were based out of New York City. I moved up to Portland, Maine area to just kind of decompress for a little while. And I started when I was younger, I was really into, seeking out all different kinds of metaphysical information. But, got away from that when I was living the crazy life of a fairly successful musician, kind of, got back into that, started. And at that time, in the 90s, there was no Google, and the internet was basically just AOL. So there wasn't a lot of information around. But once I started re-exploring, there was just a wealth of information about there. You could access any book. These days, you can access any book that you want instantaneously. And there's all these wonderful videos out there, and just as many not so wonderful videos. You have to use your own discernment, but there's a wealth of information about there, and people seem to be interested in it because these videos are getting millions of views, and it was very eye-opening and refreshing. And I just kind of naturally moved back into that after coming off the road. And from there, it wasn't like I stopped touring and then, all right, now I'm going to do sound healing. It was just kind of an exploration. I started just exploring metaphysical topics and reading books and meditating a lot, practicing Reiki, getting out into the woods and just decompressing as much as I could from that crazy lifestyle I'd been living. And I remember finding my way to my very first singing bowl event, my very first sound healing experience. And it was powerful, because sound had always called to me, and drones specifically had always called to me. And I was instantly curious what it would be like to sing with singing bowls. And I had already been on a pathway of kind of exploring sounds in different ways. At the same time, I was working with tuning forks and hosting group toning and different things like that. So it's there was a lot going on. But yeah, I was curious what it would be like to sing with the bowls. After the first time I heard them, I was like, just personal curiosity. I wasn't like, I'm gonna get some bowls and I'm gonna sing for people. That was absolutely not what I wanted to do. So it probably took a couple of years or so, but I did get a set of bowls. I bought one bowl and started singing with it, and in like 2 weeks I had 9 bowls. because it was a lot more fun to sing when you can change the actual harmonics that you're singing with. And that just became my own personal practice. I would sing with the bowls and just travel on the sound just about every morning. It was my own personal practice. I did that from anywhere from 20 minutes to time would get away from me if I did not have anywhere to be. And, hours would go by and I would be totally not even be able to believe that 3 hours had gone by. And, it was powerful, but I never ever intended to move into sound healing. And in fact, I had decided not to.
But then you did. Yeah, then you did. So, what took you from kind of using that for your own expression, your own meditation, just kind of writing the sound with the bowls, to deciding to especially work in front of groups with what you do? Yeah.
Well, friends knew I had the bowls, and I had, been offered, when I was singing with the bowls at home, I was offered sound healing events to go out and play the bowls for people, and I would do that. I would go out and play the bowls for people, but I would not sing. I didn't do what I did at home. I got those offers fairly regularly, and I accepted some of them. But I was still only, just saving what I really enjoyed doing, and I was just doing that for myself. And at that time, I was doing a lot of spiritual exploration, and I was lucky enough to be at a point where I was teaching guitar online, and I was doing that 2 days a week, and I made enough money to survive on that. So it gave me a lot of time to just explore. But and I spent years kind of just doing it for myself, or kind of showing some friends, but not doing it. But it wasn't until 2016 that all of a sudden, within a matter of a week or two, I think at one point, all of my students dried up, like instantly. Like it was, and at that point I was very much, into synchronicity and just being open and aware of things that are happening. So I wasn't panicking, but I was like, I know something else is coming. And I kept of course, still getting offers to do singing, to do sound healing events. So I would do those. And by the time late winter of 2017, of early 2017 came around, and I still pretty much had no work. I was living off, whatever money I had saved. I decided, all right, maybe I should try to do what I do in front of people, try to do what I do at home in front of people, and see how that goes, which was on the one hand exciting, but on the other hand mortifying. um, I decided to book 3 events over the course of a handful of days, maybe 3 events in 5 days or something like that. I don't remember exactly. And just to see how it went, because I knew if I did one and it was bumpy, I would never do it again. So I was like, all right, I'm going to try this. I'll do 3 to give it a solid go. And all 3 events went really, really well, extremely well received. And through those events, I was offered, one of the events I did was like a metaphysical fair where there were lots of vendors. And through those events, I got offered a bunch of other events, and it actually really quickly steamrolled into what I was doing for a living. By the time summer was around, I had a pretty full schedule. It was very quick, and it was, very noticeably, I had already, having experienced the path of when things just start magically aligning, which happened to me in the early 2000s when my band started to break. It was that same kind of energy where it was easy to get the forward momentum. It was just there, and there was not a lot of resistance. So I knew that was the right path. So I allowed it to happen. The universe twisted my arm and
Yeah.
and made me.
Yeah.
After resisting for years, I got that swift kick in the butt.
Yep. It all led you to this. So, some practitioners work more with individuals and some with
Mm.
groups, or they have a balance. And a lot of your work is group work. Why do you think you were so drawn to work with more of that kind of collective, intentional work?
I was drawn to that because with what I'm doing, I'm very called to work with group energy because having had in the retrospect years of examining what I've done, but also before I was even doing sound healing, I had been trained in group work, holding circles and stuff like that, and just the power of the energy of the group coming together, working with intentions, being able to take that amplification of the energy, and a lot of amazing things can happen with that. When you come together and you focus your energy together, hold an intention together. Intention is everything. Wonderful things can happen. So I took that and I incorporated that into my sound healing events. That was what I was specifically called to do, and what I'm still specifically called to do, working with group energy. I do some individual work here and there, and that is powerful as well, but not in the same way. It's not the same calling. Like, it's a calling to do the group work.
And now it's such a part of your life. I mean, it's really full
Mm.
time. But what were some early aha moments when you decided, okay, I'm going to go out, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this in front of people? What were some of those early like confirmations or feedbacks you got from people that made you realize, oh, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and this is helping people?
Yeah, well, it was just so well received. People seemed to get quite a lot out of it. I heard amazing things that they had experienced, and it was just extraordinary. And also, there was the financial side of it, which was what pushed me into doing it. It's a part of the world we live in, so we have to deal with it. And when you're successful at something, it becomes easier to want to repeat it, especially if it becomes what you do for a living. But at the same time, finding the balance of not having it be all the way about that. But I've been so lucky in a lot of my life of doing things that I love, being able to do things that I love, and do those things for a living. But it was the experiences that people shared and the way it was so well received and the way it grew so quickly, it was it it was powerful. And I did not I don't believe I started really posting anything online because I was resisting it the whole way. I don't think I really started posting any videos online until, I don't know, 2018. Um, and I started posting some videos, and they would like instantly get like 10,000 views, 100,000 views. It was crazy, like right out of the gate. It was just like, wow. So I started trying to post more regularly. And when I first started posting is when they were really crazy, and then it died down a bit, but it's grown significantly over the years. Um, and that has helped a lot, social media. But yeah, I was stubborn the whole way.
Yeah, it's really interesting that the timing, obviously, for you, it was such a transformational part of your life getting into this, but actually just what 2018 until now, what, it's so needed at this
Mm,
time in our lives. Why do you think just this mindful use of sound is so important for people to experience? If they can just get in and experience um, with the way that our society, our multitasking society is set up right now. What do you think this is such an important experience to have for people in our lives?
I believe it's extremely important to find ways to attain ways to access states of consciousness that our societal structures close down, because we're very um, goal oriented, very motivated for work and getting things done. But that cuts off the creative side of the brain, the side of the brain that is open to intuition and open to receiving connection to higher information. I believe there's not just one way to do it, but sound is, it seems to be a very potent way to kind of shut down that part of your brain that's task oriented, and getting to a place where you can get to a deep, relaxed state, allow all that stuff to let go. And another side effect is it just releases tension in the body and allows things to unwind. And that's where some of the healing comes from. But it's also directly connected hand in hand with the state of consciousness, because our consciousness is so powerful, and we are at a point in time for hundreds of years at least, where we don't really put a lot of we don't really utilize our state of consciousness to the massive power that it truly is. We can, when we attain higher states of consciousness, we can heal ourselves, we can shape the world around us. And when we do so together in groups, and we come together intentionally, facing maybe not necessarily the same direction, but at least a similar direction, energetically, we can shift the world around us. And that's been there's really cool information out there about that, like the meditation effect, if you've ever read any information on that. And things like the double slit experiment, where it shows that we are actually kind of forming our reality on a quantum level, and all that combined. I forgot the question now, but what was the question?
Yeah, it was just why do you think this mindful use of sound is
Oh,
so
that's
needed
right.
right now? I mean, you are answering it. Yeah.
Yeah. I knew I was on the right track, but I just forgot what I was specifically heading towards. Excuse me. But I feel like at this time there is an energetic shifting going on within on our whole planet, and all these people are, you know, many people are starting to remember the powers that we hold, and starting to access greater amounts of intuitive information, and remembering how to come into tune with that. And sound is a very powerful way. I don't think it's the only way, but it's a very powerful way of being able to entrain ourselves into those states of consciousness. And I think that is so important at this time with all that's going on. There's all the craziness in our society. Being able to set that down and just reconnect can help to pattern the world around us in ways that are far more coherent and cohesive. And doing it on a group level just amplifies it and makes it even more powerful.
Right. Yeah, I've often found that people have issues with meditation in general. They just have a hard time shutting down. Once you introduce sound into it as
Mhm.
the point of focus, a lot of people are able to really relax into it and to shift into it. I'm curious. One thing you mentioned there. Uh, I'm curious about as a musician. Initially, of course, you went to Berklee College of Music. You really had your technique down. Do you think it is more the intuitive side, the just letting go, the leaning into the sound? Is that kind of the main difference between being a performing musician and an intuitive um, kind of sound worker? What do you feel is the switch that happened in you is how you approached music, your music?
So what I believe is, well, the main difference, because you cannot deny that you go to a rock concert and you feel energy. It's very energetic, very powerful, but it's not really directed. It's kind of a chaotic energy, and it's like it's exciting, but it's very chaotic. And if you're empathic in any way, it can be really overwhelming. Um, the difference between that and moving into working with sound intentionally, one of the things anyways, is just holding that intention, holding the space, setting the container for that energy to be used in a specific way where it's more cohesive, and creating a flow with that is beneficial, rather than just being able to feel the excitement, but utilizing that in ways that can do things like help the body to relax and heal and attain attain different states of consciousness. So that's really one of the main differences that I see, a very probably the most important one, at least in my mind at the moment.
And how do you think with your use of the drone from a young age? I think drone is such a huge part of what's happening in this sound work. What do you think
Mhm.
it does for you in your intuitive abilities to just flow with the sound? But what do you think it also does to us as the experiencer? What's happening with the drone?
Um, well, for me, I can only really speak on myself, and speculate on what others might be experiencing. But for me, working with drones um, really shifts the mind. My first experience with that, the one that I was chasing for years afterwards was, basically leaving this version of reality and moving into something else. I think people have been using sound drones specifically in that way for millennia. It's something that I feel like is just our consciousness is attuned to, probably from even before incarnation. It's something, you know, the way that that physical reality is built. I think we have it completely backwards. We're kind of traditionally taught that there's physicality and consciousness arises out of physicality, but there's a lot of information and things that are pointing towards the fact, in my own personal beliefs, which are just intuitive, but that it's the exact opposite. that there's a consciousness, and then physicality arises out of consciousness, and then there's a vast array of that, and we only have access to a tiny little sliver in our physical bodies. um and Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, because again, I forget the question.
No,
Sorry.
it does, but brings us into the sound work, the drone. This is all ancient. I mean, we're talking about
Mm,
thousands of years ago, and we're kind of in this time of remembering that. And there's so much sound healing, so many ways that people can get into it. Perhaps like somebody just getting into the field, it could be a little
mm,
overwhelming, like even to know where to start. So for people just
absolutely.
diving into the field, what do you encourage them to do or to look into and explore?
Yeah, so I get asked this a lot. A lot of people ask me, you know what should I be doing? And what I really believe in my own personal journey is that follow your intuition. And if you don't know what your intuition is, just follow what excites you, because that's one and the same. My own personal journey, I was just following what excited me. I had zero intention of doing it for a living, but that doesn't mean you can't hold that intention. There's nothing wrong with that. And just start going with what excites you. Myself personally, I started singing, and that kind of opened me up a bit. And when and that's kind of what reawakened my spiritual journey, just using my voice again. But then I started exploring sound in different ways, just because I was interested. I had spent so much time mastering the guitar, practicing, 8 hours a day throughout high school and college, sometimes more, just like till I could barely use my arms and I had to go to physical therapy. I got to the point where I was so sick of playing an instrument that you pick it up and it's all so ingrained into you that you just play the same things over and over again. So I started exploring sound in different ways, and just started exploring how sound felt, working with tuning forks, putting them on my body, which is a great practice, a good way to just feel it. But my biggest advice is, do not overthink it. Don't worry about the fact that you can't afford a $3,000 singing bowl set, or you need to be doing this or that. It's not the case at all. Sound is vibration, and vibration is all around us. So you can use anything in that way, but follow what excites you, and do not judge yourself. Don't worry about it. And maybe, if you're worried, I recommend just doing it for yourself to start. At least that's what worked for me. And then, maybe trying it out on some people you trust, which is also what I did. And just, seeing where it goes and being open. Don't try and hold on to one specific path. Just follow where your intuition leads you. And that will open up a lot of doors. And you may find yourself someplace completely unexpected, much like I did. And know that was actually your soul's path, and that's where you're supposed to go. In my case.
Right. I love that. Actually, yeah, you're absolutely right. Do it for yourself first. How does it make you feel? How does it shift you? And just build it as a personal practice. So before you even offer it to other people, it's all.
And the other side of the information can be potent for confirmation. And I bought a whole stack of sound healing books, and I even read a couple, and and read a lot of stuff on the internet. But first and foremost, I always trusted my own intuition. That was just the deal I made with myself. And I tried not to rely on that. The first setting tuning forks that I got was a solfeggio set, which is really common, the 9 tuning fork set. And I decided not to read what each individual frequency was supposed to mean, and just work with them, and see what it meant to me. And it's easier to do that when you're working on yourself. When you're working with someone else, you feel like you have to explain it, which is way easier to do if you've been doing it on yourself for years and kind of found the pathway. So that it doesn't have to be one or the other. There's a combination of both. But I think first and foremost, intuition is the most important thing on pretty much all aspects of life, not just sound healing.
Do you feel your intuition? So, guitar has been a main tool for you, and a lot of what you're using now are the bowls. Do you feel that when you come back to the guitar, do you play it differently now? Are you able to play it like you do the crystal bowls, or is that just a totally different tool for you because you had different experiences with that? So are you using your guitar in this sound work at all?
I have used my guitar in some of my albums, and not a whole lot on just the freeform exploration of sound that I do all the time, but I use it for layering in albums, and I did originally come from that space with guitar. That's where I was originally working from. So it's still there, but it's a different experience when you've spent thousands and thousands of hours mastering an instrument, and all your scale shapes and all your chords and all that. You can still set it down, but sometimes you run back into your muscle memory and you find yourself playing the same things, which there's nothing wrong with that, and that's why we practice, so that we're able to do that. But being able to set it down is also important. And it's easier to do that with an instrument that is that you don't necessarily know how to play, or is just such a simple instrument that you have to make your own applications with it, like a singing bowl. Singing bowl is a very, very simple instrument. It makes one note, and you can play it just a couple of ways. You can have it be a drone, which is when you rub the striker around the bowl, or you can strike it and you have a nice bell sound. So it's very limiting on the one hand, but it that's does not mean it's limiting at all, because you can do so much with just that.
Right. Gives you freedom and space. Right. Well, with your experience and kind of continued growth with all of this, what's most important to you right now
To
with your work?
me
Yeah.
right now is continuing the work that I'm doing, helping. There's a lot of denser energy that's coming to the surface collectively at this time. Especially, I've been talking about this for years, but it's really kicked into high gear over the past 2 to 3 years. So for me, it's important to keep continuing to help people to release that, to take that denser energy that's coming up. And it's a good thing, because there's a lot of releasing that we need to do, because there's been a lot of things that we've been subjected to that that have us entrained to lower states of frequency. But being able to just help people to come together, hold the intention to work together, to release and transmute that stuff, to be able to access the higher states of consciousness, which is one of the main things I see myself doing with the work that I do.
Yeah, with helping people kind of transmute that and get more in touch with their higher self. What projects do you have right now? What are you starting to offer to help people tune more into that?
Yeah, I do regular online events. Prior to 2020, I was strictly doing in-person events, and I was doing 8 to 12 a month, sometimes more, and driving a lot all over the place, and I was just exhausted. And when 2020 hit, I kind of just seamlessly moved into starting to bring it online, because I had already wanted to do it, but I was so busy I never had the energy. So I started building the setup that I have now, which, if you've seen my videos, I kind of built it over the course of the past few years, mostly in the first, mostly in 2020. And I switched to doing a lot of online events, and those go really well. And it's different. The in-person events, I'm basically just working with bowls and my voice. And then, I have solfeggio tubes that I use, and some tincture symbols that I bring. But I can only do so many things at once. So usually it's just the bowls and my voice, which is wonderful. And that's how I started. But when I switched to working with sound online, I've been able to incorporate elements like binaural beats, and synth pads, and drums, which are my own drums, sampled. Those drums. I don't know which direction to go. I can't get out of the way. There we go. Those drums, the drums you hear, if you've been to one of my events or just heard a video with the drums, they're actually those that I sampled myself. And same thing with the shakers I use. But yeah, with the online events, I was able to start incorporating all different elements, which was and is fun and exciting, because you can change out a lot of things. And I generally do a couple of online events a month, and I have not been doing a lot of in-person events, but I'm planning on getting some booked at the top of the year. I decided that once we're through this year, I'll get back into doing in-person events a little bit more. I recently moved from Portland, Maine. About 5 months ago, I moved from Portland, Maine to Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm in a new area. But yeah, mostly that. And right now, at this point in time, running from November through January, I have a series of 5 events that are kind of all intertwined. But yeah, it's mostly just the sound work, and I have a good amount of other things that are coming up in the background that are too much in the infancy to start talking about yet. And I also have studio recordings. I have a few albums out which have done well, and I need to record a new one. My last one came out in October of 2019. So it's been 3 years now, and time just gets away. And that one did really well. It actually debuted at #6 on the Billboard New Age charts, which was awesome. I can't complain about that. And it still sells really well. But I've been so busy with the online stuff and just life that I have not even really started a follow-up to that. So that's another thing. Always busy.
Yeah, yeah. But it sounds like it's all building up to maybe releasing some new material. Yeah, that's
Ultimately.
awesome. Beautiful. Well, so I'll put your website and your links in the show notes, but where's the best place for people to find out what's coming up next for you?
My website has a portal to everything.
Okay.
My website is innerselfsustained.com. But I'm pretty active on Instagram and YouTube and a little Facebook a bit as well, but mostly Instagram and YouTube these
Yeah.
days, social media.
Yeah. Yeah. Your setup is really beautiful. So gosh, any kind of last words, last expressions that you'd like to leave us with?
Sure. Yeah. And I guess this being a sound healing podcast, I guess what was I was just instantly called to saying was, um, anybody can do this. If you're called to do this, don't feel like, like I was a Berkeley trained musician, so you have to have music knowledge or anything like that. That is absolutely not the case. There's so many people that are doing sound healing that don't really understand the mechanics of music, and you do not need that. It's all about following your intuition and finding your way into what works for you, and just explore and do not judge yourself, because you are perfectly capable, and there's absolutely no reason you can't do this if you're called to it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us and for sharing a bit of your story, and also for really stepping authentically into your path. I'm really glad you did, and keep up the beautiful work and how much you offer to others. It's much appreciated by all of us. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Sound Heal Podcast, sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa. And keep up to date with what's coming up next at soundshealstudio.com. Check things out on Facebook at Sounds Heal Studio, and you can listen to all previous podcasts as well as music meditations on the YouTube channel at Sounds Heal Studio. Be well and stay tuned.